apologise, first of all, for the fact that I look like the dinted tin version of whoever was on this morning. It's because today has turned out to be one of those days where doing makeup doesn't matter. I've just thought I can't be arsed getting myself looking half decent for this because it really doesn't matter. I don't know what to say about today. What I know is last year, people like me got vilified for our points of view, for our warnings, for our concerns, and made out to be mad, which is always what history does, isn't it? People who don't toe the line, who, particularly women, with respect, no disrespect guys, but particularly women, that's why we call it hysteria, because we like to think that everything's applied to the womb. That's the way it goes. But it was really difficult managing perfect sanity when the world tries to make out that you aren't sane at all. And I think with mental health, we always have that kind of issue, don't we? Where people will throw aspersions at you and make judgments on you and criticise you when you have certain thought processes, because it's easy to pin that on something that is about you and not about something that's bigger than you. It's not about me saying, I told you so, although that's what I've put in my tweet, because it really doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that right now, so many of you have been looking forward to today. The anger I feel, the rage I feel right now is less to do with the news about VPs, because that's a long game. The reality is that there will be a lot of court cases thrown up. So whatever your position, just hold firm to that. Why I'm rageful is because today was meant to be Freedom Day. And when I look at abusers, I look at their actions around moments of hope. When I've worked with domestic violence, I've worked with women and men who have had the carrot dangled in front of them and told that if they do this, this and this, then everything will be okay. And then they've got battered. To be told today was Freedom Day and to simultaneously announce that our children won't be allowed essentially to go clubbing at 18 unless they go ahead and have something that they may not wish to have or be ready to have. That is the most abusive it can get. I'm so tired of people being afraid to speak out on these things for fear of reprisals. But history has taught us constantly that it isn't people who follow the crowd who are innovative and creative. It isn't people who bow to other people's authority that change the world. It's people who lose in spite because their beliefs are about the masses, not about the few. Mental health is being crippled by this constant inconsistency, by these toing and froing of decisions and policies, and it's not fair. But today, ultimately, I know that so many of you have been thrown into crisis. I've seen it, I've got messages from you, I've got emails from you, and I'm looking online and seeing people fall to pieces. And I just want to say, even though I am raging, like I said, not about the long game. I'm raging about what's happened today and the impact of making so many of you feel that for a moment you could breathe out. You could just allow yourself to relax in the sun, to feel as if life was going to return to normal, to acknowledge that this has been really, really hard. We've all behaved ourselves, we've all complied, we've all done a really good job of being the best that we can be in spite of our own feelings and at times not wanting to. That's normally human, that's completely rational. But we've done all of that believing that this day would come, and it came today. and I woke up today and I thought, you know what, maybe I'm wrong about some of my fears. Maybe it's time for us to just relax, enjoy the sun, acknowledge that winter's probably going to be difficult, because I think we all appreciate that, don't we? We all appreciate that low immunity, not being near each other. We're always going to get into a situation where the winter could be quite hairy, but let's enjoy summer. But then to just take that away and to say that not only is it not Freedom Day, it's actually a day which we're going to remember for a whole heap of other reasons, I just think it's cruel. I think that if you were going to make that decision, it was never going to be okay, and I'd always be having this conversation with you, but why today? I think you have to ask yourselves that. Why today? Because to me, the level of cruelty is off the scale. And for those of you who are getting in contact saying that you can't carry on and you don't want to carry on, I'm going to say this to you. Just take a breath. Just take a breath. There is always change. You know where I stand on this, guys. You know. And just to put it out there to anybody who comes on here, like they do, and calls me names like anti-vax, which is just a way of dividing reality, because I'm not anti-vax. It's as simple as that. If I was anti-vax, my kids wouldn't have been vaccinated. If I was anti-vax, my second child wouldn't have been damaged by a vaccine. You know, I'm not anti-vax. I am definitely pro-autonomy. I'm pro-bodily choice. This is my body. I look after it very well, thank you very much. And I have options. That doesn't mean that I might not have a vaccine or might have a vaccine. It doesn't. What matters is I have a choice in that method, a choice in that action, right? That's it. So if you're coming on here to say negative things about the reality that your bias is creating you to have those beliefs, it's not my reality. But it comes down to this context that a lot of you are saying you don't want to be here because of the way that this is playing out. And I'm saying, take a breath. Every civilization, and you know where I stand on this, every day of the week, I'm a Democrat. That's it. I'm democracy focused. I believe in freedom. I believe that this world belongs to no one. Guess what? This is my bulletin. No one owns the world. Screw you, anybody who thinks that you do. Create your little governments, do all of that stuff. You don't own Mother Nature. She owns us. Full stop. That's it. End of. The universe, whatever your belief system is, exists. She's in control. People can play the games and give themselves titles. It's all ridiculous. When do you walk around a graveyard and it says, brilliant Prime Minister, fantastic accountant? It doesn't, does it? It says beloved father, beloved mother, beloved sister, beloved son, all of those things. Why? Because life is about relationships, because humans are animals that require relationships to thrive and survive. Right. I like democracy. However, that doesn't mean that at times things don't change. It also doesn't mean that things can't be okay within that change. Think about all of the different kinds of empires that have existed. Throughout history, there have been the rises and the falls and the reincarnations and the transitions and the transformations. And part of being human is that that happens during different periods. And we're in one of those periods. And you can freak out about it, which is really easy to do, or you can just say, okay, this is a weird time to be alive right now, but hey, I'm here, and this breath of consciousness, this fleeting moment of our life, this is something that very few people are ever going to get to experience. They're never going to see things like this change and transition. And whilst that provokes fear, I appreciate that. Fear is calling us for courage, right? So we're being taught courage. I don't know where the future is going to end up. I don't write that, and I certainly don't want to control that, because whenever you try to control it, it just backfires. But what I do know is that these worst case scenario ideas that people are going to be carrying around right now, they're things that we have to kind of take a breath on. Because like I said, change is always problematic and challenging and painful at times, but usually it's incredibly productive, creative, and like I said, if you just take a breath and just say to yourself for a moment, okay, this isn't the way I played it or wanted it to go, but let's just accept that this is a path that somebody is choosing right now, And I don't have to be on that path with them. I can choose an alternative. That's okay. Because there are always alternatives. That's the beautiful thing about being in the free world, no matter how that can feel constrained sometimes. But mental health is dictated to a lot by the way that we feel in our environment. So for those of you who are saying that there is no point being here and that you don't want to do this anymore, it's like you've got to take that breath. You don't know what's going to happen next. Human beings are always unpredictable. And even though I'm having one of those moments where ultimately I'm like, I feel like I need an apology, it really isn't important in the scheme of things, is it? That's just human arrogance and ego. And it's not one that I ever wanted anyway. But what I am saying is that there are lots of people who are sharing these fears and feelings. And that means that every single person experiencing it is not alone. Every single person that is going through these tumultuous experiences and feelings, feeling the failings of what we're seeing around us, the promises that have been broken, the lies that have been told, we're sharing it. We've shared a lot in the past 16 months. And you know how I always say this, guys. I don't care whether you are the most pro-lockdown, pro-mask, pro-vaccine, or anti all of that. You're welcome here. Because when you get rid of those tiny details about a human being, most of us are exactly the same. We all want similar things. We all want to be safe, loved, cared for. We want our children educated. We want to be healthy as possible. We want to feel that we've got money in the back pocket and we've got a roof over our heads. That's where everyone meets here. And right now, all of those feelings that people are having equally on both sides, it connects us. I just needed to say that because I've had this growing frustration in me all day. And I think that that growing frustration is probably a mirror of how so many of us feel, that our voices aren't being heard. And when we are trying to get volume on them, they get stamped on. It's always easy to follow the party line because it causes the least resistance. But in my opinion, resistance is always relatively positive. That's why when we lose weight, we use resistance bands. It's not because they're bad. It's because it causes us to flex and grow. It causes us to become lean in the way that we approach the world. But I just want to acknowledge all those emails that I've got and messages I've got. I'm hearing them all. And I'm really sorry that it's a struggle and that today was the day that they did what they did. It's conflictual and it's unfair. And it says more about them than it does about you. And like I said, change is always the nature of the universe. It's always the nature of the world. And instead of fearing it, just acknowledge that this is a moment that you're seeing. And generations to come, they won't understand that. They won't know that. And whatever eventuates from all of this, no one else will ever experience it. And yeah, that's scary. But also, like I said, there'll still be so much beauty, no matter what. And that's why you've got to stop with those extreme ideas about what you need to do next. Like, you don't need to do anything. You just need to pause. The birds are still flying, the sun is still shining, the love in your life still exists. There is still so many constants right now. But if you concentrate on the bit that you have no control, that feels chaotic, if you catastrophize over it, all that is going to do is going to volumize anxiety, it's going to volumize low mood, it's going to make you feel completely helpless. How is that going to help? How is that going to help? In fact, isn't that just the counter of what's required? What's required now is resilience and courage and a recognition that every single one of you listening tonight is a unique masterpiece. Every single one of you. Every single one of you. Within each of you is something that Mother Nature has predetermined is magnificent and unique. You know what I say, you only get a fingerprint to recognize that you are the mark in this world that only you can bring. So when you start feeling that helplessness, just look at that fingertip and be like, there is one of me. And maybe you've got lost and not realized how profound that is. And if you just take a step back and be like, wow, there's just one of me. Mother Nature knows what she's doing. She placed you perfectly in this world, and you have got some kind of reason for meaning of being here. Take a breath. I'm saying that to myself as well today. Just take a breath. let's get on with this. Hiya, Will. You're online today. Hi, Emma. I'm struggling a bit at the moment. We've recently found out that hubby's granddad has been taken off his cancer treatment as there's nothing that they can do. His cancer's too advanced for his treatment. We're so devastated. How can we get through what feels like a countdown until he has another stroke? Also, how do we stay calm, knowing several of his vital appointments over the past 18 months have been cancelled? We're both filled with sadness and anger. How do we manage? Any advice would be really appreciated. So, Will, there's a few things I'd say there. Number one, I think it can be really understandable to buy in to what people tell you about an individual and what's next. And what I want to bring you back to is the fact that Grandad is still here, is still present, is still worthwhile life-wise, right? Doesn't matter that his cancer treatment stopped. I want to pull you away from the overthinking about what's happening next. I want you to pull you back to what have you got with this human being? What words need speaking? What memories need reliving? What legacy needs creating? How can you take ultimately every single minute that's left with this human being and make it miraculous in the way that you share and you explore and you engage and you ensure that at the end of the day, you are creating so many of these memories that even when he's not present, he'll still be so present. So that's one of the things that I do. Look, ultimately, death is coming for all of us. In the UK and the Western world, we're really bad at acknowledging that. We're all going to die, and some of us are going to die younger than we should, and some of us are going to die older than ideally we should really. You know, we're going to outlive what we even want to be here for. And some of us are going to get lucky and be bang on average, right? There is no rhyme or reason. Life is fleeting. But it's about the relationship and the love that you have that gives your meaning. This human being that you're talking about is so loved that you feel rageful that they've missed appointments. Like, think about that. Yeah, don't get me wrong. That's awful. It's wrong. But think about what that meaning is, that you feel rage. This human being has got so much power, so much meaning, so much intense connection, both to you and your partner, that you feel rage that they've been let down. That is an incredible love. It might feel like anger, but it's not. It's your primal rage because you adore this human being. So acknowledge that. On top of that, okay, the medical system can't help, but the medical system isn't the only system. Look up on the cancer forums what other people suggest. Believe me, the cancer forums are amazing. I've had a lot of clients in the past, particularly when I did a placement in palliative care a long time ago. We're talking a long time ago. I used to be amazed by the amount of information that they would come out and talk to me about. And they would go online, they would speak to other people with cancer. They would talk about treatments that they were trying. They were all online that, yes, weren't available on the NHS, but hey, there's a lot of stuff that isn't available on the NHS that is brilliant for you. Like, go to an NHS canteen, they'll serve you chips, burgers, and a whole heap of bad carbs. It's not good for you, but they'll sell it in the canteen. That's not health. So, obviously, health is one of those things, isn't it, that's very subjective in certain areas. So look at that, look at diet, look at how you can help him have the best life until inevitably he has a good death. That's what you want to prepare for as well. But like I said, don't allow somebody else to define those last time and terms. You know, don't. Create it yourself. What can you do with him? How can you make every moment matter? And like I said, how can you connect with other cancer sufferers who may be in similar situations, who've tried different things? And there are things out there that I would strongly recommend you go and explore. Like I said, this earth is full of healing. It's full of it. For every curse, she creates an amazing healing opportunity as well. So remember that. Hi Emma, I was just wondering if it's normal to sometimes feel guilty when people are kind to you. Like you feel like you don't deserve it, or you feel like they're only doing it out of pity. I feel like I don't have too much to offer, so I don't understand when people are kind or make an offer with me, and I feel like they'll get sick of me and abandon me eventually. I've been diagnosed with having a mild form of BPD, and I have social anxiety too. Thank you very much, as always, for doing these clinics. It's my birthday today. I don't know what your name is, but whoever that is, happy birthday. Happy birthday. At least that's something to celebrate today, my love. So a few things there. Sounds a little bit like you got a bit of the imposter syndrome, okay? So when you've got BPD as well, even if it's a mild form, usually that comes from a place of trauma, not always, but a lot of research does indicate that usually it comes from a place of trauma. And part of that is about the self-regulation of emotions. Because when you're developing your emotions, particularly if something affects you at a traumatic stage in your life, where you're kind of developing your emotional vocabulary, then understandably the volumes can get switched right up. So it can feel extreme, and abandonment can be one of the biggest triggers. Abandonment for people with BPD is incredibly painful. I would say physically, emotionally, socially, experientially, all of those. So you already recognize that those volume switches are kind of high on that level. So when you meet people and they're nice to you, there's a few things that will be going on. Probably one of the things is that you are really nice to them. That might seem obvious, but when we have these issues about abandonment, and we might not like ourselves very much. So I'm just supposing, I'm not saying this is you, but I'm just throwing it in. But let's imagine for a minute that you have a bit of self-loathing. You know, you don't really like yourself that much. And so you go out of your way to try and over-please. So you're really, really nice when you meet people. But because you're over-pleasing, you kind of feel like a bit of a fake. You're not. You're just using the volume switches on being a pleaser on their top volume. But you know that that's not absolutely the real you. The real you is maybe a 7, not a 10 when it comes down to that being nice. So then you beat yourself up because you're like, if they knew the real me, they really wouldn't like me. But it's not true. The 10 that you're acting, that is the real you. But it's the real you that isn't that sustainable. And the real you is still going to be good enough when you're a 7, i.e. you're still really you, but you're just not making the effort to the point where you're exhausted or where you just can't keep it up and therefore you feel like you're going to let people down. It's my rule. When people used to work with me, and I had quite a few perfectionists in my staff base, I used to tell them I don't want 100%, I want 70%. And they used to think that was really confusing, but it was true. I didn't want 100%. I wanted 70%. I wanted it to be sustainable, consistent, and always present. I wanted them to be a solid member of staff who could always achieve the goal because it made them feel good and they weren't exhausted and they didn't have to try so hard that it broke them. So I want you to think about that a little bit. That imposter syndrome, it's not. It's just the natural part of you that's being over-pleasing and over-kind, which is why everyone loves you. Who wouldn't love a pleaser? You're then thinking, well, this makes me a fraud. It doesn't. Like I said, it just means you have to pull back a little bit from that and be like, I'm okay when I'm just a 7. I'm just going to be me, but not that over needy, I'm the best person in the world to you. I'll do everything that you need. I'll go out of my way for you at a detriment to myself. Remember, we want to regulate those kind of emotions, particularly when you've got BPD. So that's what I want you to hear from me tonight. It's like a reeling back of that over-enthusiastic, brilliant human being that you are, and just allowing yourself to be a bit more at peace. That's what I say you need to do. And then the authentic self and the realistic self will be in check. And you'll be like, I don't need to worry about this at all. Like one of the rules that I have in life, and everybody who knows me will tell you this. This is me. This is me 24/7. You don't get another side of me. Obviously, if you're married to me, you get a more critical side from time to time because we're in a relationship. What I'm saying is this kind of personality, this is it. There is no in between. When you meet me in the street, I'll speak to you like this. When you meet me as a stranger, I'll speak to you like this. When you meet me as a friend, I'll speak to you like this. Why? Because it's too exhausting to be anybody else. I'm totally imperfect. I definitely make loads of mistakes. And I'm not a great human. I'm just a really basic average human. And I'm okay with that. Because I'm okay with that, I'm never worried about what somebody else thinks of me. You don't like me, you got a problem with that. That's fine. See ya. And I know that that can sound brutal, but it's brilliant. There are people in the media, there are people in journalism, there are people in the general public who cannot stand me. Knock yourself out. I'm not coming home to you every night. You're not in my community. And if you can't see who I am because you're jaded or blinded by your opinion that you've formed that isn't real, off you go with that. I'm not going to give it another second's thought. That's an attitude I've cultivated because otherwise it destroys you. So think about that. And that's to everybody out there. It's to everybody. Right now, if ever there was a time in history, particularly since I've been born anyway, where we all need to be a bit more okay being ourselves and let go of those who do not fully accept us and embrace us, and instead just stick to the people who do, that is such a good way to live. It won't get you the top job. It won't mean that you thrive in situations where narcissists rule. It won't. You'll lose sometimes, but God, you'll lose on your terms. That is so life enhancing and enforcing. Lose on your terms every time. Hi Emma, I suffer with terrible anxiety over death. It started after I was 12, after a surgery. I'm now 34 and it's still present. So good few things there. First of all, thanophobia is one of those particular phobias that we do see regularly. So I want to normalize it a little bit. Obviously, I'm not going, oh, fear of death, totally normal to have it in an extreme way. I don't mean that. I'm saying when we see phobias and we look at the list of phobias, it's kind of up there with things like claustrophobia. It's a more common phobia. And you know why? It makes sense, because we all die. And having to manage that and accept that is incredibly scary a lot of the time, because we haven't done the work around what that means to us. However, you've also got a really great connection. You realise that at 12 years of age, that's when it hit you. So you had surgery, traumatic obviously, and during that period, for whatever's gone on, there has been a connection that you've made at 12 years old, as a child, feeling powerless, not having control, obviously going through an anaesthetic, dealing with an operation, that in that moment you have created this really strong connection with the potential of dying. Now that could have been for a whole heap of reasons. You might have heard people talking about death. You might have even, this isn't conscious by the way, this could have been completely unconscious. This could have been going on around you. You could have heard people in the hospital talking about it. You could have listened to a TV show just before you went on to have your operation that was also discussing the subject of death. It could have been casualty, where somebody died during an operation. Think about it. When you're going into a situation where you're going under a general anaesthetic, one, it is quite helpless inducing because you're not in control. Secondly, hospital can be quite affronting. Most importantly, as a child, you can't really do anything about that situation. And of course, you're at a point where you realise that things can go wrong. So they're all really present in that one experience. And you wake up and you're alive, but to some degree, you've had this moment of experience where you've started to question the potential that things can go wrong. And on a survival instinct level, think about being a human. Like, what is our primary goal? Why are we all freaking out a lot at the moment? Our primary freaking out at the moment is because we're human beings and we're like, damn you, death. I'm going to live for as long as possible. How dare you even come near me? That's the way that our survival program is. We're animals. We're meant to live as long as we can. We're meant to survive as long as we can. We're meant to fight hard to make sure that we do, right? That's what you're hardwired to do. Anything that compromises that, if you think about it on a really clear brain level, it makes sense that you go, I am going to create this structure where I survive above all costs. Yours has just gone into full-on volumized state. Whereas instead of you saying to yourself at 12 years old, wow, I had an operation, was put under, went through it, survived it, isn't it amazing how resilient the human body is? You've kind of gone into a, but what if worst case scenario? And that's created and exacerbated this phobia. Now, the 12-year-old, we've got to leave behind because you're a 34-year-old now. So as much as we can go back to the child state, and don't get me wrong, there are therapies that you could do that, like schema therapy is great for doing that. Obviously, when it comes down to trauma therapy, EMDR, fabulous therapy, really good at neutralizing fear. So look that up as well. But when it comes down to phobias per se, it's almost like saying, okay, what is this serving a purpose of? What is this doing for me? And often when it's a phobia, people are like, well, it's doing nothing for me. It's horrible. I hate having this phobia. But I want to ask you a question. You'll need to think about this a little bit. Are you somebody who really struggles to ever have your needs met? Are you one of those human beings that always puts your needs on the back burner And when you need to express a negative feeling, you don't feel that it's valued or heard all the time. Maybe you've got yourself into a situation where people are used to you taking care of them, and therefore, whenever you have a feeling, you don't really feel entitled to have it. So then you've packaged all of these difficult feelings up and you've placed it into, at this point, thanaphobia, where you've got this fear of death. And whenever you allow yourself to feel that, it feels very, very present, very, very real, very, very scary. But actually, if you start allowing yourself to just speak more of your truth, to say, actually, I'm struggling, or I'm in pain, or I'm feeling depressed today, or I'm afraid of what's going on at work, or what's going on in the world, and so on and so forth, that can actually help to really start to alleviate some of those feelings and fears and bring it back down to a more manageable level. The other thing that I say, and I say this to everybody who comes with these kind of phobias, I cannot take the reality of what you're experiencing away, as in, there is going to be a day for all of us where our lives end. And I don't think we talk about it positively enough. The only worth to our experience and existence is that it comes to an end. It is that we are finite on this planet, at least, that gives meaning to our world. So to some degree, the more comfortable that you can get with death, the better. So if we think about the OCD spectrum and we look at, for example, exposure response prevention therapy, ERP therapy, even though OCD is slightly different to phobic work, it can still be used very much in tandem. So with ERP, it's all about accepting that we have these feelings, but making ourselves get exposed to them more and more. So what would I suggest for you? Genuinely, I suggest this to anybody who's got issues around death. You need to get more comfortable with it. Instead of looking away from it and hiding from it, you need to confront it and face it. Now, you can do that in a range of ways. In therapy, we might start watching DVDs that involve death and dying. That might feel scary, but actually the more that we associate with it, the easier it gets. It may be that we watch documentaries on Dignitas or assisted euthanasia. We start allowing ourselves to see death up front, where we watch people going through the motions of dying and death, where it isn't horrible and painful and awful, because death usually isn't. And then we start getting more comfortable with that. Also, I'll put on here a TED talk that I often put up. It's already on there, I believe. He said he's put it on there. He's already preempted me. It's about death research. Again, I know you're scared, but just go with me on this. Just, if you really want to start moving through this particular phobia, I want you to go with me on this and I want you to watch it. It will reassure you, and it will also expand your consciousness around what death may be and what it means to you. I always say I have a massive bias. It's really important that I acknowledge that, because obviously I can only bring my advice to this session by also knowing what my bias is. I do believe in God. I have a massive faith. I'm not religious in the context that I follow a doctrine. I feel a massive affiliation, which I consider God being the universal creator. I believe the big, beautiful beyond is there. We are eternal. We are conscious beings. And this is a moment where we are experiencing the human body. So I always put that out there, because for me, death is merely a moment between this dimension and the next. The more comfortable that you get with that, whether it's spirituality or whether it's atheism, it really doesn't matter, because either way, neither's scary. If you go on my route, then everything is beautiful and continues, and the lessons that you learn in this life help you move forward through your next dimensional experience as you reconnect with those that you've loved and lost. And if you're atheistic and you get comfortable with death, well, it's beautiful. There's nothing. I mean, there's nothing to be afraid of when it just ends. It's stunning in some ways, either way. But like I said, work on those things. So ERP, also look up EMDR, look up schema therapy if you want to do some child work. But most of all, get comfortable around some of those features and topics, okay? That's what I'd really recommend. I was left with ICU PTSD and can't get help until I get diagnosed, but they said it was a 3-year wait because of COVID. There's no support and I've been left destroyed and can't get help. Any advice? Okay, so what this individual who's just got in touch is talking about is there is a syndrome called post-ICU syndrome. Now, ICU PTSD is another way to describe it. I would describe it as post-ICU syndrome, which means that this individual has been through intensive care. And obviously think about that for a minute. One, often you're sedated during pretty terrifying hallucinations at time, when you're going through the actual experience of being intubated and all of those things that can be absolutely traumatic beyond belief. And what we see is about 50% of people who've been on intensive care wake up feeling massively traumatized. Now, some trusts in the UK do have a pretty good post-ICU syndrome therapy service. There are actual places that do that. My father suffered from it. There was no help whatsoever. And I completely understand where you are, because I know how difficult and how challenging and to some degree how catastrophic at times that was for my dad. So I just want to acknowledge that. However, what can you do? Well, first of all, I know it's really hard to be on a waiting list. 3 years does sound like a billion years away, and it can feel overwhelming that that's the case. However, what can you do in the meantime to maintain your mental health? So we're going to put on SOS, which is a helpline. Even though it's silence of suicide, I promise you, it's just people who talk. You can call them, you can have a conversation when you're struggling. You might feel like you want to do that, you might not feel like you want to do that. I would suggest it can be really helpful to have those conversations. I really would. Also, places like Mind are excellent. They're great listeners. But when you can build in strategies as well that are going to help you calm, that would help as well. So I think tapping's really easy to learn. It's called emotional freedom technique, EFT. That's also what a lot of people use in EMDR, which is more eye movements, but you can go online and learn about that, and it will just help to calm your anxiety. Secondly, healthy bedroom routines. Look, with any form of post-trauma, the more sleep that's restful and positive, the better it is for your mindset per se. And if you haven't got healthy habits around your bedroom routine, we need to create them. That can be something as simple as making sure that 2 hours before you go to bed, you have a really steaming hot bath. I know in this weather, everyone's like, Emma, are you insane? Why would I have a hot bath? I'm just telling you now, research says that a really hot bath 2 hours before you go to bed will mean that the body cools naturally, it relaxes you more, and it gives you a much better night's sleep. Secondly, meditation, mindful practice. Anything that takes you away from the future or past, i.e. worrying about then or fearing about the past, helps you to reconnect with the present, will reduce your anxiety. That's what we want to do. When you've got post-trauma, you're highly anxious all the time. We need to reduce that. How do we do that? We do it by reducing the cortisol levels in our brain and anxiety levels, by reducing those chemicals, hormones that are going on in there. So meditation, mindful practice. What else? Support groups. There will be support groups out there. Now listen, it might be for something like PTSD that's general as opposed to more specific, which is what you've gone through. But nonetheless, the ramifications and impact of PTSD are similar per se. You're going to have flashbacks. You're going to have high anxiety constantly. You're going to potentially have panic disorder. All of these things are happening, and they are common experiences. When you connect with people who get that, it feels like you've come home. So whilst you might not be able to get the therapy straight away, stay on that list. You're going to need it, and that's okay. But if you can find a tribe, I promise you that will help dramatically. Just knowing that you've got people around you who understand. The other thing that I'm going to say that's probably obvious and probably isn't affecting you is if you do drink, please be very careful around alcohol, any kind of self-medication stuff. If you see yourself overeating when you're struggling, drinking when you're struggling, taking recreational drugs, or any of the things that are bad for you, remember that's just a deflection. You're deflecting what needs to get dealt with, which is the pain. It's horrible to go through post-ICU syndrome. It is. But nonetheless, it is completely redeemable. You can move through it. Now, there are a few things I want you to do. If you've been looking at PTSD as opposed to post-ICU syndrome, I want you to Google post-ICU syndrome. In America, there's a lot more stuff. So you might have to go on some American websites, but America have sites where people tell their stories about it. And I found it really helpful. I used to read them. It was after Dad was no longer with us, but I started to learn about post-ICU syndrome. I started to learn about how scary it is for people and how outside of their control and bodies they feel, and the depersonalization that goes on. And it really enabled me to kind of feel like I had this connection with something that I hadn't understood. So I want you to really do some research around post-ICU syndrome, and also look online whether there are any charities that are around that, because I think with COVID, there's going to be a lot more people experiencing this. Like I said, 50% of people go through it if they've been in ICU. So look online at whether there's anything springing up. You might find there are some research projects. There might be some clinical trials which are looking at those kind of things for people, because understandably there are going to be a lot of people experiencing it. Also things like clinical hypnotherapy. These are things that might help reduce some of that anxiety. But just know that you're not alone, even though you probably feel completely alone, and you're not going mad. This is something that we see, and it's really difficult, but you will be able to get through it, I promise. You just need to create those strategies around you and stay on that waiting list. I know 3 years feels like a long time, but man, we've done 16 months here, haven't we? Think about that. We've done 16 months in lockdown and all of this craziness. So you can get there. And you've been through the biggest thing ever. You've survived a really terrible incident, right? There's resilience within you rushing through your veins, even if you don't feel it, okay? Hi, I'm really struggling at the moment. I'm living with an alcoholic dad. I'm unable to move out for financial reasons. I have a lot of trauma to process. I was referred to urgent mental health services, only to be called back to say there's at least a 2 months wait to be assessed, plus the wait for treatment. I'm beyond breaking point and don't know how I'm getting through the day anymore. Can you please help me? Oh, first of all, I know it's really frustrating being on the waiting list, but I'm so glad you are. We can always look at the negative, or we can try to reframe it and make it a bit more positive. So you are on the waiting list. And yes, that's just to be assessed, but that is a step closer than you would be if you weren't on there. Secondly, when you have an alcoholic parent, it's really challenging. You want to hit them, not physically, metaphorically, because they're meant to be there to protect you. They're meant to soothe you. They're meant to calm you. They're meant to parent you. But of course, when they're an alcoholic, they can't do that. And they can't do it because they haven't got the resources within the self to manage it. So you're almost in a situation where there's a grief process going on simultaneously. You're looking at a parent and you're thinking, you're meant to look after me. And letting go of that and acknowledging that grief is really important. It's not your fault, and it's not really their fault. They're not well. That's something that we often don't have a lot of sympathy and empathy for. But alcoholics, they're not well. It's like having a disease. They wouldn't choose to be in that situation unless they were put there because of difficult lifestyle choices, addictive personality situations where they have a bit of alcohol and it becomes part of their self-medication, pain that they're trying to deal with. They're all present in that person. And I know it still comes down to the fact, Emma, but they're still choosing alcohol over me. I get it. When people go to AA and do the 12 steps, part of that is atonement. It's about recognizing the impact that you have on others. But your parent, even though they're doing dreadfully to some degree, they're doing the best that they can with what they have right now. And not expecting them to be able to meet your needs is hard, but it's also realistic right now. And that doesn't mean that you can't put that thought out there with them and be like, Dad, AA is amazing. There are all these opportunities to go to meetings and to connect with people who completely understand. You don't even need to be sober more than a few hours to go. You can do that. But if they're not willing to engage, you kind of have to be willing to say, okay, this behavior is destructive for me to try to engage within. So I'm just going to make peace with the fact that I can't control him, and I'm going to make myself feel as safe as possible. By removing some of the desire to change your father or to manage his behavior, then you can concentrate more on the self-care that you need. You have done nothing wrong. It's really painful to deal with the attachment issues caused by a parent who hasn't been present for us. It's not your job to heal him. You can't, you won't be able to, and it will just mean that you feel like you're failing all the time. And if you start self-caring and bringing it back to, okay, what can I control in my own life? What impact can I have of my here and now that means that I can protect myself? They're the things that you need to ask yourself. You're on the waiting list. You're going to get there. Just recognize that. Secondly, how well are you taking care of yourself? And I ask that question because so often we're not really doing the best that we can around our bodies, around our mental health, around our physical self. Are you eating a healthy diet? These are the bedfellows of what makes happy, healthy humans. So are you eating a healthy diet? Are you getting activity every single day? I'd say exercise, but I know a lot of us are so done with the idea of exercise, but activity. Are you getting out in the white light for at least 2 hours a day? Right now, you should be seeping that in, getting those vitamin D levels up. Are you reaching out and asking for support? Are you saying to people, this is a real struggle for me? Not the people that you're talking to in the support services. I'm talking about the people around you. If you haven't got people around you, can you get involved with some groups who understand what it's like to have an alcoholic in the family? There are groups of people who meet. That's what they do. They are family members of alcoholics and they support each other. I've put the Helpline SOS on here because I think they're brilliant. I am an ambassador for their charity, and the reality that I've put that there is because they are willing to listen to anyone, no matter who you are, how you're feeling. even if you just pick up the phone and you're like, this is shit, I'm really struggling and this is why. Those kind of minute reach out potentials can transform the way that you feel about the present moment. You need to do that stuff because you're carrying around all this toxicity from living with him. You're saying you can't leave at this moment in time. I do want you to remember this, right? There are options for people to leave home. Like universal income is there. You know, you can get universal basic income. You can go and get housing benefit. You may have to speak to them about the specifics around what kind of landlord you can have, because obviously some landlords are private and they charge more than they would do if you were getting universal basic income, so housing benefit doesn't always cover it. But there are options. Don't ever feel limited that way. Look online at the organisations around you that look at housing. I am one of those people that anybody who knows me will say that I always find a yes. That's it. Like I always find a yes. A million people can say no to me and I'll always find a yeah. I'm just waiting for the yeah. There's always a way forward. There's always a plan B. Just get your head on that and figure out, well, what is it that I want? Do I want to be with dad? No. Okay, well, if I don't want to be with dad, I've got to do A, B, and C to get there. Do I reach out to people? No. Well, I need to do A, B, and C to make sure that I'm starting to do that. And when it comes down to the therapy, stay on that list. It will be worth it. That's the key. And also, like I'd say to anybody listening right now, if any of you are in crisis, the NHS is fully open and you can absolutely ring 999 if you need that help. Do it. Do not hesitate at all. What do you think with regards to my mum's accident and dealing with the fallout psychologically? It's still affecting me having to deal with how she is now. I'm not sure what your accident is, but any bad accident is going to affect somebody psychologically. If you're having to deal with the change in her behaviour, then that's going to impact you, of course. I think that any of us who have a parent who's had problems and found themselves dealing with trauma, it changes the way that they are. And if they're older and they've had a bad accident and it's even changed the way that they are mentally, because let's say somebody gets hit on the head, it can completely transform their personality. It's a grief process, isn't it? We're going through an experience where the person that we once knew has transitioned into somebody that we're getting to know. It doesn't mean that we can't make peace with that and it can't be a good relationship, but we have to acknowledge that there is a period where we need to grieve. So arguably, I'd say that's stage one. How do you come to terms with the person that you're now getting to know? And also, how do you deal with the injustice of when there's been an accident? I mean, it is an injustice, isn't it? Somebody gets hurt badly and you're like, that sliding doors moment. I often talk about sliding doors, but it does feel like that, doesn't it, in life? That there'll be one thing that happens that creates this domino effect, and you're like, wow, if that just hadn't, I do that with my dad all the time. I'm like, if I'd run into the garage and not into the main house, dad would still be here now. We all have those sliding doors moments. Making peace with it is painful, but it's also the only way forward. So you can't expect your mum to be who she was before the accident. You can only expect her to be who she is now after it. And how you help her adjust to that and how you adjust to that is about learning who she is in this moment, not who she was back then, whilst also allowing yourself the grief process of letting go of what you used to know and what you used to accept and what you used to enjoy, and mourning that loss. But like I said, still feeling a celebratory experience that she's still present with you, because if it's been a bad accident, then she might not have been here at all. And acknowledging that you're learning. One of the hardest things for me constantly is to be grateful for the pain. And I say that not underestimating how in the blink of an eye, I would give away everything that I've got not to have this pain. Of course, I'm not gonna be one of those humans who sits in that arrogant position going, oh, everything happens for a reason and it's wonderful. It's like, actually, I wish that it hadn't happened, but it did. So I'm learning to deal with pain gracefully and learning to accept the lessons that I'm being taught with humility. And I'm learning a lot because of it. The shifts and shapes as we transition through our lives are bruising and sometimes agonizing, but every time we hit one of those bumps in the road, and sometimes those chasms that we fall down, as we learn to kind of slowly clamber out, cut to shreds often, we tend to realize that the person that we're becoming is a more sensitive, compassionate, loving human who has far more wisdom and wealth about who they are as an individual than who they were before those experiences. Like I said, you would never wish to have to have gone through that, but you don't get to choose sometimes, right? And so that grace that you develop as you move through those experiences, I think that's where the beauty of pain exists. Like I said, none of us would choose to go through it. But then what kind of a vacuous human being would we be if there weren't the potential that comes with all of that pain? That's what I've learned to see. There's just so much potential in there. As long as we don't let it drag us down and break us, it helps to raise us up. Hi, Emma and Pete. I work as an independent investigator. Ooh, I like the sound of this one. I love the fact that I never know what's coming up and I'm like, what do you mean? You're not investigating me, are you? I'm an investigator. I'm coming shortly to arrest you for, I don't know, crimes against humanity. No, that's somebody else who's going to get the crimes against humanity one. Hi, Emma and Pete. I work as an independent. Everyone's like, what is this? She's not. Let us get on with this, Emma. Stop. No, I'm going to keep you waiting. I work as an independent investigator and I'm researching the government's changes to children's services. I work with lots of mums who have or are going to experience forced adoption. I'm so passionate about helping others, but I cry most days. Pete, sorry. But I cry most days. Sorry, I've lost it now. Sorry, it's terrible. It just went up and down and I've no idea why. 10 strokes for Peter. Oh. Jonathan, come in from the cupboard and sort him out. Hi, Emma and Pete. That'll be in the mail on Sunday afterwards, won't it? You know, Emma keeps a guy called Jonathan in the cupboard. I work as an independent investigator and I'm researching the government's changes to children's services. I work with lots of mums who have or are going to experience forced adoption. I'm so passionate about helping others, but I cry most days and I've lost weight since I started intensely researching as it's traumatic. I also have EUPD. My friends tell me to stop, but I can't ignore what's happening. Any tips for my self-care plan, please? First off, I want to acknowledge that the fact that you have EUPD, emotionally unstable personality disorder, means that you're putting yourself in the eye of the storm, and that's just something incredibly courageous about you. You know, you feel deeply, you feel really deeply. So when you're watching these adoptions occur, it's not as if you are just standing to the side in an objective professional capacity. You're connected to it. And on one level, that makes you a beautiful professional, an incredible professional. And on another, it makes you one who is going to feel the brunt of that experience. So your friends to some degree are right in saying to you, look, you know, we have to take care of you in this way. We have to make sure that you've got some boundaries because otherwise it's going to swallow you up, isn't it? The thing about empathy, I remember when I first did my first training course in therapy, there was this picture, and in one of them, it was a person in like reeds in the water, drowning, and the person who had sympathy just dived in and drowned with them, whereas the person with empathy would lie on the side and just reach out with a stick and allow that person to pull themselves out using it. So you were kind of in it with them without being dragged down. We need you to feel the same. So the most important thing is to say to yourself, what use am I if I feel so broken that I can neither function on a personal level or a professional level? Those women, they need you to be able to have these boundaries so that you can be the best professional that they could ever encounter, that you can offer them an empathetic, understanding experience where when they hear you talk to them, they know that you're completely on side. But when you walk out at the end of that day, you're not dragging it like a burden, because you need to go home and rest and recuperate so that you can be revitalized for the next day. People often say to me, do you get dragged down by this? And the answer is no, I do not. I leave the people's problems that I deal with here, not because I don't care for them, but because if I take them with me, I'm never going to be of any use because I'm going to be just drowning in it, right? There's going to be so much collateral in there that I'm going to be drowning. I need to leave it there so that I can walk away, de-stress, That's why you have clinical supervision as well, and I'm sure that you'll have that in social work, that you'll have some kind of supervision to deal with those issues. And then I pick them back up, and always I have this understanding that no matter how dramatically dark it is for individuals who are dealing with their pain, there is always hope. That's what I hope I bring here all the time, no matter whether we have days like today or otherwise, that I'm always bringing in this sense of hope. Because when you are steadfastly believing in these women, even when the courts are against them at times, you are the difference. But you can only be the big difference if you stay sane and well. And that comes from those professional boundaries. And it's almost like accepting that you only have this many hours to dedicate to that job, and when you walk away, it's done. Like it's a switch. That doesn't make you unsympathetic, and it doesn't make you without empathy. Quite the contrary, it gives you professional boundaries. And the reason I do that is because they need you. The other thing I do is, there's no use thinking, well, this is going to be awful, the courts are going to take all these kids because they've got quotas. And believe me, I get where you are, okay? So I read vastly. You know, one of the things about me is that I never stop learning. So I know what you're saying. I know about the quotas in local authorities. I know. So I'm completely on the page with you. I know what you're saying. But you do make a difference because you see it. And because you see it, there are going to be options as you grow your career, as you become even more professional, as you do even more amazing work, and you get taken even more seriously. You are going to have an impact because people are going to see you as this wise social worker with all of this experience, and they are going to listen to you. Believe me, throughout my career, there have been moments where I've had to stay silent because I knew that my voice in the room would just be ignored. I didn't have the skills. I wasn't time served. I wasn't fully trained, and so on and so forth. And believe me, people still try to do that to me now. I don't care. No one gets to keep me quiet now. It doesn't matter. I've got the confidence to do it. I've got 20 years experience and more. The point is, I waited and I took every little bit that I thought that was wrong with the system. And that's why I do what I do now. Because it gives me an opportunity to be heard and valid and valued because of what I know and what I've done. You're doing that every day that you go in there. You're earning your stripes. You take those notes. You work out what you think needs to change, and then you become the change. Don't let it drown you. Don't let it suffocate you. Don't let it break you. Quite the contrary. Let it build you. And as you take in all the things that are wrong with the system and service, you think about ways that you can change and challenge it. And as you get those stripes built more and more, and you go higher and higher, you get to be the system that changes it. See, right now, you can fight all you want. You'll get drowned out. You're not in the position yet. But in 15 years, and that might feel like a long time, but believe me, in 15 years, you could be director of social services where you are, and then you can make such a profound impact. You might not be able to save all the women who are having their children adopted right now. You may not get to do that. And if you base your experience and what your meaning is on those now, you're going to fail, right? That's the best advice I've got for you. If you're going to say, well, if these forced adoptions keep going now, I'm failing, you're going to fail. You don't have the power, you don't have the voice, but you build it. Maybe it's not about the kids that you could save in those relationships now, but in 15 years, you could be the only change that's ever been required. You could transform it. Hone your skills, work on your professional boundaries, know your limits, and then keep determined and take every bit of that information that you know is wrong and unjust, and wait and build and grow. And then by the time that you get there, you will be the biggest silent assassin that they've ever invited around that table. And then you fire. That's the best advice I could give you. That's what I spent my life doing. And it's worth every moment of it, believe me. Hey Emma, I'm a bit lonely and lost at times. So much information and people flexing everywhere. Sometimes in desperation I turn to Grindr and don't feel there are any alternatives for sexual exploration. Some guys don't message after meeting. Makes me feel sad and a bit used. I'm addicted to checking Grindr for some reason, seeking connection with guides. I don't know if it's healthy. There's a few things there, Josh. Okay, so first of all, we know that when we get attention online, we get a little hit of dopamine. So dopamine is the area of our brain chemical that makes us go, ooh, that felt nice. It's not like serotonin. So serotonin is more what we get released. That's why people take ecstasy tablets, because you get a massive rush of serotonin and everyone's like, oh, everything's really great and happy. But dopamine is kind of like more about like, oh, give you a little bit of a stroke there. So that's why we keep going on social media. That's why we'll be like, just gonna look through there because all the little likes and people commenting gives us that little hit, right? It's why we've got to digitally detox from time to time, because our brain is basically connected to that. And we see that in brain scans, we see it in studies. So the Grindr thing is a connection because you're creating this kind of little, I'm wanted, I'm validated, I'm needed. And that's great because it's nice to be all those things. But if you're saying that when you go and have sex with one of these guys, they don't get in contact with you, that makes you feel shitty about yourself, then you need to rethink your strategy. Okay, I enjoy like sexually experimenting. Right, so let me see this. I enjoy sexually experimenting. My therapist didn't agree with Grindr. She said I could seek relationship, but I want to explore the sex. Oh, who's your therapist? I mean, we all bring our biases to therapy. It's definitely not my job to tell a client that they shouldn't experiment sexually because that might be important for them. Equally, if you're putting yourself in damaging situations that are dangerous, I would completely have empathy with your therapist saying, it sounds to me like you want a relationship, but you keep damaging yourself by having sex with people who make you feel bad. So I'm gonna give your therapist the benefit of the doubt. I'm gonna suggest that your therapist is being really caring and empathic towards you. And what they're saying is, you're coming to therapy saying, I feel lonely, I want connection, I want to have a good relationship with somebody, but I keep going on Grindr, having sex with guys, and then I keep feeling abandoned, rejected, and it makes me feel used. In that case, we understand, don't we, why your therapist is saying, well, let's just hold on a minute. You keep repeating this pattern. You say that you want a relationship to make yourself feel good and give you a sense of connection and value, yet you keep doing something that gives you a result that you can then beat yourself up with. So sexual experimentation is fine. If you want to go and have sex with people safely, then definitely do it, as long as the payback isn't bad. If you want to experiment sexually, then you have to put that in a box where you're not expecting anything other than that. Grindr is a great app and it has amazing opportunities if you want to hook up, but it's less positive for the potential of meeting a long-term relationship. So you need to kind of box it off. Okay, well, Grindr is where I go for sex, unless I get really super lucky and find somebody who's looking for marriage on there, but I don't think that happens as often. And then I'm going to think about relationships over here. So I'm going to maybe get on a dating app that is more about dating, more about connecting, more about meeting. And also in between that, like, think about going on some LGBT specific experiences. So getting involved with your local LGBT group, where men go to actually connect and work with a common purpose. It's a great space, the LGBT environment. So maybe look at doing that as well. Just creating those opportunities. But I do get where your therapist is coming from if they're saying that you keep going and getting used and then you feel really depressed about it. So try to bring it back to sexual experimentation is okay as long as we don't feel shit afterwards. If we feel shit afterwards, it's not working for us. Okay? It's not working for us. Just a big shout out as well before I finish. I know a lot of you watch my crime, which blows my mind. It's brilliant. I do get to be very sarcastic and I get to be me instead of being told what I have to do or don't get to say the things that really matter. I get to do it. You've all been unbelievably supportive on my YouTube. It's blowing my mind. But I got told to start Patreon by some of you. I did today and I don't even know what to say. I don't get it. I have no idea why you want to know what's going on behind the scenes in my life. I don't get it. I don't get it, guys. But I just have to say thank you so much. Oh, I promise you I will try to make it interesting and bring in lots of extra things about crime, but there will be the madness of me as well. That's all I can say. Patreon, I'm like gonna have to do every day or something. So like, don't expect that it's all gonna be crime. It'll probably just be me like that. Oh, I don't even know how to get up today. That's me every day before 8 a.m. Like literally, or like my eyeliner all down my face. Like the lead out of Schitt's Creek, you know, the mother in that, where she's always got her eyeliner everywhere in the morning. That's basically me. But I just wanted to say a big thank you. And remember, the last bit I'm gonna say to you all, I don't know why I'm doing Superman. Just gonna take off. Did I tell you I was an X-Man? The last bit I want to say to you all is, today has been tough, right? It's been tough. It's been tough for me. I was writing my closer column and I couldn't concentrate because I felt this righteous rage. I cannot believe what they have done to you today and to me today. It is cruel, it is unjust, it is unfair, it is unnecessary. One day, we weren't even allowed one day. But I bring you back to this. Chaos creates the greatest growth. There is far more that connects us than separates us. Human beings, the majority, the vast majority, are good beyond belief. And communities are all that really matter when it comes down to surviving. We are resources. We are resources. It is human beings that have the power, not small groups of people. If all of us work together, care for one another, are compassionate towards our children, bring up society full of love and wisdom, kindness and care, is there really anything ever to be afraid of? Ask yourself that, because the power lies with us. It always has, it always will. And the only time that stops is when you stop believing it. Don't let yourself stop believing it, because that's their trick, to make you feel helpless. You're not helpless. Every single one of you is powerful beyond measure. Remember that fingerprint. You're a one-off, unique masterpiece. Figure out why you're here. And I bet you part of why you're here is so that moments like this have meaning where we all connect. See you soon.